Welcome to another episode of Focus Matters. Today's going to be a little different. Today, I've got a special guest in the studio. I'm joined by Don Moxley, who is well known for several different things, but mostly in the circles of human performance, he's known as the HRV guy. And if you go onto YouTube and you search his name, you'll see countless podcasts where Don gets to pontificate at length about HRV. So we're going to explore the world of HRV. And before we do that, and before we introduce Don more formally, I just want to frame up why HRV is so relevant to this podcast. So this is a show that focuses on focus and attention from cradle to grave, really looks at it largely through a performance metric. And so when we start talking about HRV, it becomes a very important KPI. It's a critical performance indicator of how well we're resting, how hard we're training in relationship to our rest. And training can be physical training, it can be emotional training, it can just be life in general. So while we look at HRV as an important metric, we're not saying HRV is the only metric, but it's such a critical metric in life and our ability to maintain optimal living standards, both physically and cognitively, that it's worth this deep dive. And it's an honor to have Don here. So Don, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's an honor to be here with you. Thanks a lot. I mean, this is not a run-of-the-mill podcast. This is a good one.
Thanks for that. So we should dive in a little bit into your past, but not spend too much time on it. So I'll do a quick recap, and you course correct as we go. We actually met through, if we go far back in your history, we met through a mutual acquaintance where you both worked at Polar. So our friend Jeff Collins, who's now with Aura, was there when you were there. And for anyone who follows heart rate training, they know that Polar Electronics, Polar Electro has been the leaders in being able to measure heart rate and heart rate variability, and then they turn it into a useful metric. Because just because we can measure something doesn't mean it's worth paying attention to. But on a personal note, you really discovered the value of HRV through your passion and your personal experience as a wrestler. So another acquaintance of ours told me, and this is one of your claims to fame. He said, when you meet Don, one of the first things you'll notice is how big his hands are. He has the largest Aura ring available, and it barely fits on his pinky. Although I see you're actually wearing
No. I wear it on. It's a 13, but I've only got one finger that'll wear a 13.
So let's connect the dots. So let's spend no more than a few minutes, 4 or 5 minutes in your background on the wrestling world, because I think it's wonderful to see that this isn't just an academic exercise. This was something you discovered as a high performance coach in a tough sport, wrestling in the Midwest, where they raise them farm strong. So let's start there, and then we'll jump forward into what is HRV, how do we measure it, and explore several of the different techniques that you have developed and discovered as to how we might be able to boost it.
Well, no, thanks for the opportunity. As you said, I'm an old wrestler. I that was my sport. I only had one sport. Was a decent high school wrestler. Went to Ohio State. Walked on there. Got the thunder beat out of me for 2 seasons. Finally, got some things right. Became a pretty good wrestler. Still hold a couple records there at Ohio State that are now coming up on 40 years old. But 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 I changed my life back then because I had every intention of going back to the farm that I grew up on and feeding beef cattle for the rest of my life when I showed up in Columbus. But because of injury, because of some things, I had to figure out what's it take to compete.
Sure.
And fell in love with human physiology at that point and just changed my direction. Sat through an ag econ class and figured out unless you inherit a bunch of land, you're not making money farming. And said, okay, I'm going to go a new direction. And so, and again, this is the early 80s. Very little technology. Desktop computers were really not a thing yet. We were just starting to flirt with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I am very dyslexic. And so when desktop computers landed on my desk, we became friends really fast.
Interesting.
And it just changed my ability to perform as an academic. So worked my way through. I'm teaching at a relatively big community college in Columbus. And and was had a chance to work with the team from Polar on a project that they had. And while I'm working with Polar, I wound up going to work for Polar. Uh,
Hmm.
all of a sudden, I see this technology that they're using for several of their features that was called heart rate variability. And they had integrated. This is before smartphones. This is before all this stuff. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting because one of the fundamental problems I had, Noah, is that when we did exercise prescription back then, exercise prescription was based on an estimate from max down, um,
Max heart rate.
and
So again,
max heart rate
I'm
down.
going to continue to jump in here just because my audience isn't necessarily familiar with all these terms. So yeah, it was max heart rate minus your age. Sometimes you do a test, sometimes you wouldn't get a
Well,
percentage,
we
etc.
could either do it
Right?
with age, or I could put you on a treadmill till you George Jetsoned off the back, and then I had your max, and we go from there. And frankly, and you know what? It's reemerging right now. VO2 is becoming a thing again right now.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't I don't like max heart. I don't like max exercise tests. Most people don't. Um, and so all of a sudden, Polar had this technology where I could estimate your training heart rates by just having you go from rest to a small walk to a jog. And this
Hmm.
thing would had an algorithm that ran and picked up HRV and would estimate the bottom of your training zone rather than the top. It estimate the bottom and we'd work up from there. I love that. I think that
Mm.
fit the population very well. Um, so that's what first got my attention. Um, left Polar, worked for them for about 10 years, picked up a ton of stuff, learned a lot. Left Polar, opened my own facility in this little town in central Ohio called Granville, um, and really started to dig into the HRV thing. I had an emergency room physician that was a member, and his wife were very good friends of ours, and we had extensive HRV discussions about the value and the fact that I was measuring it with a piece of wearable tech blew his mind. Um,
So again, like just to frame this up a little bit, the only way to measure HRV at this time was a chest strap, right?
the only way to measure it was a chest strap, correct?
And so Polar, you needed whatever the version of the H10 was back then. So you'd wear a chest
Well, you
strap.
needed the wrist unit. It wasn't
That's
nearly as
right.
much here as it was here, but
That's right. You
yes,
needed
but you
both.
needed that
Yeah.
system. Yeah,
Yeah. So it was a closed system. You needed the heart rate, you needed the chest strap, and then their giant watch. Their giant watch. I loved their watches. They were in so early, but they had the worst charging application on the planet.
I
A
agree.
whole nother story.
I agree.
So you're tracking HRV, you're becoming more aware of it very quickly, again, for the broader audience, because I always assume, I try to make the assumption not everybody understands these terms. What is heart rate variability? What are we measuring?
So heart rate variability. So heart rate is the number of beats per minute, the number of time your heart beats per minute. That's heart rate. Well, I can have a heart rate of 60 beats a minute, and that means we expect to beat about every second.
Hmm.
Okay, beat, beep, beep. Now, heart rate variability is about measuring the time between the beats and seeing how much of a change there is. Okay,
Hmm.
that's where the variability comes into play. So when you have high variability, instead of being beat, beat, beat very consistent, your heart rate goes beat, beep, beep, beep. Still 60 beats a minute, but
Hmm.
very variable. Um,
Hmm.
and what that's telling you, so this is a measurement of what's called the autonomic nervous system, which
Hmm.
is, and we'll take a step back here. Your nervous system has two big sides. You have your motor nerve system, which lets you move your fingers and talk and do all the things you do. But your autonomic is what I call the automatic nervous system. This is what runs your organs. This is where your fear sensing and response is coming from. So the
Hmm.
autonomic nervous system is what HRV is measuring. And when we go into the autonomic nervous system, a term that many people will recognize is the autonomic nervous system has two sides as well. There's what's called sympathetic, what we refer to as fight or flight, fight, flight, or freeze. That's
Hmm.
sympathetic nervous system. And then there's also what's called the parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest, digest, and recover.
Hmm.
Okay. And based on your heart rate variability signals, we can determine, are you sympathetic? Are you parasympathetic? How long have you been here? And we can do some other diagnostic work inside of the data. Um, but it's just an excellent tool for understanding what resources does your body believe you have on board to deal with the next stress that's coming across the horizon at you.
Perfect.
And
Perfect. And counterintuitive to many, the higher your variability, the better.
higher
Because
the
if you were to
availability.
just step back and look at it, you think, oh, if you are familiar with the term homeostasis and the body's always trying to stay in this state of balance, you would think that our bodies want that predictable boom, boom, boom. But the truth is, and again, I always ask people to course correct me as we go, we don't live in homeostasis, we live in
No,
allostasis. We are
right.
constantly adapting to stress. We're constantly, so the pendulum is always swinging. So HRV, a high HRV, is showing healthy allostasis, where you are able to constantly being able to adapt to the stress that's in front of you. Correct?
Yeah, you have resources on board.
Mm,
Noah, I like to think of stress as fire and HRV as a bucket of water.
hmm
So I can have a fire on my stove that's very good for me. It's a good stress, but you got to
hmm
control it. Okay.
hmm
I can have a campfire. Again, a nice bigger fire keeps the bugs away. It's very nice. Okay, but it's very controllable. And Smokey Bear will
hmm
tell you when you don't do campfire, you drown it.
Put it out.
Um, yeah. So the bucket that you drown it with is heart rate variability. It's recovery. It's parasympathetic. If my house is on fire, I need lots of resources,
Yeah.
okay, to be able to deal with it. So, and the house on fire is there can be any number of things. There can be an event coming up. There can be stress in your family. It can be financial. It can be physical. There's all kinds of stress, and stress that eventually becomes trauma. Stress that becomes memorialized in your fascia, and kind of tunes your system. Again, I tell the story that if someone's born in a rattlesnake pit, the only way they survive is through hypervigilance. It's the only way you make it out. But if I take you out of the rattlesnake pit that you were born in and I put you in a house full of bunnies, you're still hypervigilant. Okay. The
Well,
body
bunnies are
adjusts to
scary,
that.
Don. Wait a minute. I
Well,
mean, any Monty Python knows how dangerous
and
bunnies
there
can
you
be.
go. It's Monty Python. You got to come up with the Holy Grail, right? Um, but yeah, this is the challenge, and this is the beauty of the wearable tech that we have now, is that we have ready access to these measurements with the wearable tech. And I just sent a note to a friend today. I said, is it possible to have optimal health without having optimal HRV?
Hmm. Interesting question.
I'm not sure you can.
Mm,
I think you can have good health. I think you can have health that you recognize as you're symptom free. You don't have anything on an illness perspective, but you still may be challenged with the resources being able to step to be when we start talking about optimal. So HRV for me is this 30,000-foot indicator, KPI, it's the first thing I look at. It's the
yeah.
first data point that I look at. Am I doing good or am I struggling? And I think, when you and I first met, I was finishing up a stint this summer where I was toying with 100 millisecond HRV measurements. Um, Right now, I've been under a lot of personal stress recently. Um,
hmm
and my HRVs have tanked.
Mm.
I'm way back down. I'm way back down in the 20s right now, and I got to start to work my way back up. I've got to establish a process, resolve the parts of my life that are creating stress. I've got to
hmm
deal with that. These are things that, frankly, right now I don't have control over. I can just react to. Um,
Which
and
increases
so
stress because we know that when we have stressors that we can't control, those are force multipliers for
they're
stress.
brutal.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're brutal.
So a question for you there, and then I disrupted your narrative, and I want to get back to your narrative. When you say we were at 100 milliseconds HRV, was that peak HRV or was that
It's average.
average HRV? That
Average
was
nighttime.
average. Wow.
My peaks were in the high hundreds, low 200s. Um,
Interesting. Yeah. So for
yeah,
those who don't know, for a guy in his middle ages, that's a giant number.
it's one of the best I've ever seen. I was
Yeah,
very
it's a
proud of
giant
that.
number.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So back to wrestling. Because I know this is again the origin story.
Right.
You're a wrestling coach, personal athlete as well, wrestling coach. Take us to that point, that epiphany point where you have this technology available and you realize, wait a minute, in order to make it to the state level or the national level, you realize there's a pathway
There were
here.
two things that happened. Number one, the head wrestling coach at Ohio State had come to me. Ohio State had this unique situation coming up where they had a kid coming back that had won 3 national titles and was coming back to win his fourth. Um, and this had only been done 4 times in NCAA wrestling in the history to that point. Um, we had 3 freshmen who at that time who then went on to become 4-time All-Americans. One became an Olympic gold medalist and 2-time world champion. The other two were national champions. I mean, it was just a great group.
Hmm.
That was 4. But to win a title in wrestling, you kind of need at least 5 point scores um, in the tournament. So we had one wrestler on our team who was struggling. He was a very talented kid, 3-time Pennsylvania state champ, which is really, really hard to do. It tells
Hmm.
you he's got talent.
Hmm.
But he was just not adapting well. So the coach brought him over to my lab. I wire him up, and before I put him on the bike ergometer, I check his HRV, and his HRV at 9 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday morning, 48 hours after a match, was only 10 milliseconds, um, which is what I would expect to see from anybody else when a lion walked through the door. Okay,
Hmm.
this is a full sympathetic load for the most part.
Hmm.
So I have this kid go lay down in my facility. He lays down for about 10 minutes. HRV just climbs up, gets up to about 100 milliseconds while he's laying down. And as soon as he stands up, back down to 10, which tells
Crazy.
me his body recognized the act of standing up the same as a
As
lion
a
walking
threat.
through the room.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. So I finished the test. I pretty much knew what was going on at that point, but I finished the test. I said to the coach, I said, listen, this kid, he's maladapting to the training you're doing right now. You may be training him for what it takes to be a national contender. I'm not debating that at all.
Right.
What I'm
But
saying
that
is
template isn't working for
it's
this
not
athlete.
working for him. It's maladapting.
Yeah.
And they said, what do you do? I said, you got to train him for what he can do.
Hmm.
So, this is 2015. So this is a decade ago. I reached out to a friend of mine who worked for a company called Omega Wave. I said, what do you guys have now? And she sent me the latest, greatest device that just come into the country.
Was this
Um,
Trisha?
that was Trisha. Yep. Yep. Trish Sterling. Um,
Okay.
and another friend of ours. But get this device. We start working with him, basically modify 9 workouts. Um, put ceilings. I put ceilings on his training. It wasn't about training harder, it was about putting a ceiling on. Had to
Hmm.
fix his sleep too. He was
Hmm.
sleeping with his girlfriend at the time. They were living together. She had an apartment, and I said, Kenny, I said, no offense, but you need to sleep in your own bed at night by
Hmm.
yourself. And she was not
Because,
happy with me.
but
Uh,
you could see he wasn't recovering at night, right? I mean,
any
like
number of things.
again, to be really clear, the evidence is so supported now. You don't get stronger when you're training. You get stronger when you're recovering. And
Exactly.
so if you're training to be state national champion and you're doing this high intensity training, but you're not, for whatever reason, getting the recovery stimulus, it's very logical that your HRV is going to show
You're just
that,
burning
right?
resources.
Just
Just
burn
burning resources.
resources. Okay.
So again, the two things. I needed him sleeping by himself in his own apartment. Told him, I don't care what you do before you go home, just
Mm,
go home.
mm-hmm.
And number two, no alcohol. Um, that when you start measuring HRV, you're going to see alcohol as one of the biggest poor hard effects on HRV as anything going. So we work with this kid, we get training on, we do some work, we getting through Big Tens, and the Big Ten conference is one of the most difficult conferences to qualify. Well, I don't know if we qualify more people in the nationals than any other conference. Any given year, uh, 12 of the top 15 teams in the country are from the Big Ten. So that's kind of who's in the tournament. We got him through the tournament. Like thing that excited me so much was the fact that he had to score 12 points twice or 10 points. It
Mm,
was a high number of points. He
mm,
wasn't scoring 2 or 3 points a match for the
mhm,
months before that. He had to
mhm,
score twice, and we get him through Big Tens. We get him to nationals. We do a little bit of work in between Big Tens and nationals. But that work that we did was on a bike ergometer that I could program specifically for his threshold. And
mhm,
literally, I just saw his HRV start climbing, and then
mhm,
it broke. So when we sent him to nationals, we sent him to nationals with a HRV of 75 milliseconds. Um, and he made All American, and the team won a national title. And all of a sudden, the coaches that were looking at me 2 weeks before, like I'd lost my mind with the way we're training, are like, "What is this voodoo you have?" And
right,
so the coach brought me into the staff, and I have a former teammate that's an autonomic medicine specialist. He purchased for me what's called a first beat system, which is another HRV measurement system. And this, you put a halter monitor on the athlete. So I put a sensor here and a sensor here, and we tape it down, and they
mhm,
wear it for 48 hours. So
mhm.
we're getting good nighttime measurements at this point. And so we have this in 2016. So we're in the fall of 2016. That summer, my heavyweight Kyle Snyder won a gold medal in Rio. He comes back, and I had not done much work with him prior, but he comes back. We wire this guy up, and we're getting nighttime resting HRVs with this guy that are 150 milliseconds, the highest we had ever measured. And then by the time I do the rest of the team, my third place in the country was 98 milliseconds, and my fifth place in the country was 95 milliseconds. And literally, I'm starting to get this linear line from my existing athletes as to HRV and performance. So that was
So,
our first indication that, okay, there's something here.
so let's just be very clear. So that's correlation. That's
Exactly.
100% correlation. We're
Exactly.
not saying if we raise your HRV, you're going to be a better athlete. We're saying in your own term, if we can get your HRV up higher, your bucket of water is bigger, that is increasing your capacity for training, it's increasing your capacity for stress, and therefore also putting you in a better position so that when you're on the mat, you have more reserves so that you
Yeah.
have more in the tank, right?
To make All American, you've got to win 5 matches in 3 days.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's lots of things that go into being an excellent athlete, but we've cleared all those. These are skilled kids. They're already on a big program. They got great conditioning. They've got good mind. I mean, they've got a lot of good things going. What's the determinant at nationals? Reserve. Your ability to compete, recover, and go back. So, and when we saw this, then we started investing in it. No, so I didn't do anything that's not correlational. Okay.
Hmm.
I'm an applied scientist. I embrace placebo. Okay. If
Yeah,
placebo
sure.
will work for me, I'm feeding it. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, at the end of the day, I'm looking for results. And so, but it may only be correlational, but it is strong. Um, and so we started investing in recovery, and we started driving the development. We taught rescue breathing. We taught recovery breathing. We started floating the guys. We were doing some work with the Naval Special Operations Group out of Virginia Beach, and they told us about this thing called sensory deprivation float tanks.
Hmm.
Um, the last year I was with the program, we floated that team 140 times. Um, it moves the needle, and when I find something that works, I throw buckets at it. And so this was, and then to finish the story now, in 18 was the last year I was with the team. So in 18, we qualified our whole starting lineup for nationals, first time in school history. 10 guys
Mm,
went.
impressive.
We had 8 All-Americans, most in school history. The 2 guys that did not make All-American had HRVs below 70 milliseconds. Everybody else had HRVs above 75 milliseconds. Um,
Interesting.
so while I have while all my data is correlational, I never had an athlete make All American with an HRV of less than 70. And everyone I sent to nationals with an HRV over 75 made All American.
It's impressive.
So
Okay. So let's I appreciate you sharing that. Let's take that and sort of bring it forward. We'll fast forward here for a moment. Lots have changed since then. We now can measure HRV multiple different ways. You and I both
easily,
wear Aura. I also wear a Whoop. We know that a lot of the wearables are chasing HRV with differentiating success. So if we're looking not at a all-star wrestler, high school wrestler, let's move forward in time. We're looking at a larger population of people in their 30s, 40s, 50s who are looking to increase the tank, right? We're looking to increase our reserves. Couple questions. Um, how variable is HRV to age? Number one.
it descends. It descends with age, um, but it doesn't have to. Again, 63-year-old guy. I've and there's do listen. I don't wake while may wake up most mornings and look at what my HRV is. I don't necessarily shape my day around that.
Okay.
Okay. Now, and as an athlete, I don't think I would either. I think as an athlete, what I would do is I'd say, here's my goal. Here's what I need to do to achieve my goal. And I would start a training process and I would use my HRV to make sure that I'm on the pathway to the goal. And if somewhere along the way HRV tanks, I need to change the plan a little bit. If somewhere along the way HRV is floating too high, I may need to turn the temperature up. But it's my second indicator on the pathway to the goal. Um,
Okay.
and if your goal is long life, what we know, Noah, is that the minute before you die, your HRV goes to zero. Okay. And we know my Olympians are in the mid hundreds. Okay.
Right. Right.
I think it makes a lot of sense that we want to be in between those, but heading towards the Olympian, not towards zero.
Not towards zero.
Yeah. And listen, there's a lot of people. Listen, I talk to a lot of people that are struggling with HRVs in the teens and 20s. And like I said, there's times when I get into that place too. But once I get everything straightened out and get everything pulled together, like I told you about this summer, I worked I've in the last 2 years, I've been able to hit month averages in the 70s and a month average in the 60s. And two different, one was out in Lake Tahoe and one was back in Ohio. So I've been able to duplicate it with different practices,
Hmm.
and that's why I do it. Um,
Well, we're going to dig into the practices in a couple
yeah,
minutes. I have a
yeah,
couple more quick
that's why
fire
I do it.
questions for you, and then we'll
Okay.
get into the practices. So HRV there is some decay with age. You mentioned earlier, we talked about VO2 max testing. And as you know, as you indicated, VO2 max is very popular again. There's more conversations around you can't get your VO2 max up high enough. There's a direct correlation between higher VO2 max and longevity that's being preached.
Yeah, you got to
Do
be careful
you
there.
do you see a correlation between VO2 max and HRV?
I see a correlation between cardiovascular fitness
Okay.
and HRV. Okay.
Okay.
So it's important to note with cardiovascular fitness, I can measure my level of cardiovascular fitness with a nighttime resting heart rate,
Hmm.
with a heart rate at a given workload, or at max. All three of those variables move as cardiovascular and fitness improves. All three of those variables move as well.
Mm.
Okay. So yes, you do want your cardiovascular fitness to be as high as you can. It looks like there's probably some genetic controls. Listen, I walk around this earth weighing about 270 pounds. Okay. At 270 pounds, VO2 max of 40 with me, and I'm using as much oxygen per breath as Lance Armstrong is. The
Hmm.
difference is he has half the kilograms I have.
Right. Right.
Okay. So it's milliliters per kilogram body weight per minute. We're in the same
Hmm.
minutes, and when the oxygen's the same, the only thing that changes is the kilograms.
Hmm.
So until I cut my right leg off, my kilograms are kind of fixed.
Which will make the erg test harder, by the way, just to be clear.
Depending on the
Yeah,
erg. If I'm
yeah,
on a bike, I do okay. That's
yeah.
one of the reasons I like a bike so much. Um, but but yeah, so but I restate that it's not about VO2 max. It's about
Mhm,
cardiovascular fitness. VO2 max is just one of the measurements, but it's not. We don't need VO2 max to determine am I fit or not. I can see
mhm.
that with a lot of other aggregated data along the way.
Okay, fair enough. And then, another question, and I think you alluded to this one as well. In conversation with various different biometric experts, this whole question of our obsession with our sleep scores. So you start wearing Aura, you start wearing
Yeah,
Whoop. First thing you do in the morning is you look at your numbers. How much does that influence your performance throughout the rest of the day? So, a friend, Michael Rabosco, has been on the show, cognitive director for the LA Galaxy. Wearables are optional, but the rule at the Galaxy is you can't look at your sleep data day of performance because you mentioned you'll take placebo all day long, but it can work in reverse. I look at my
absolutely.
data. Oh my God, my HRV crashed, or oh, my sleep score is terrible. I'm never going to be able to perform today. So, one question there is in your own practice, because you said you have a plan and then you use HRV as a way of potentially modifying that plan. So if I'm not competing as an athlete, but I'm looking to get more fit, and so today I'm supposed to do today's my 4x4, right? Today I'm supposed to do my VO2 max intervals, but I wake up and my
Is a
HRV
sucker
is
for punishment, aren't you?
my HRV has dipped, not crashed. It's dipped. Let's say I average 40 and I'm down in the 20s. Do I do it anyway? Do I think I have enough in the tank that it doesn't matter, or do I push that to another day as just a practical usage of this data?
I think it's a mistake to wake up in the morning and look at your data and decide what you're going to do. I think that's a mistake. Um, I do think if you wake up in the morning and you've got a hard workout and this is the first time you've done this, it's more of a reflection on your preparation for that time rather than the actual execution, meaning that, okay, what did you miss in your sleep? What did you miss in
Mm,
your sleep routine? What do you need
mm,
to fix back there in order to show up with that instead of 40 being 60 or whatever? So
mhm,
I like to use it more as a reflective tool.
mm,
And then as and kind of a fire extinguisher pole, you know, if I'm training and all of a sudden I'm going into the shitter on this on my HRV stuff, you know what? I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to reevaluate everything.
right.
Something's not right. Now,
Something's not right.
now the beauty is with a lot of college wrestlers, I can solve that with them sleeping by themselves and not drinking 5 days a week.
Mhm,
You know, that moves the needle a lot because these kids have already demonstrated the fact that they're very elite people.
mhm.
They do a lot of things well. I'm just I mean, I'm tuning carburetors at this point. If for the audience, a carburetor is a thing that used to be on an engine that you had to tune with a it what you know. So um,
Well, so at the opposite, well, not the opposite end of the spectrum, but somewhere along the spectrum, I'm having the opportunity to have more conversations with pretty high level Air Force pilots who don't
mhm,
control their sleep. So now they're in programs where they don't have as much control over their routines and they still have to perform at very high levels.
yeah.
So
So
let's get into some of the cheat code.
one bad night, if you've got a sleep routine, one bad night of sleep won't ruin it. But the opposite of that rule is true. If you've had 15 nights of bad sleep, one good night of sleep won't fix that. Okay.
Mm,
So this is a long process that we're engaged in. Um, and first of all, recognizing that sleep is money. Okay, in the training space, and this isn't just for sport, this is for longevity. I like to
it's
talk
for
about
life.
athletes, athletes parents, and athletes grandparents. You know, that's
Yeah.
kind of the three phases, right?
Yeah.
And sleep. Now, God, Noah, we used to do things in college. I mean, I you know I used to I've showed up for 6 o'clock workouts still drunk from being out the night before.
Sure.
Okay, but you're a good enough athlete that you can get through the workout and you think, well, if I can do the workout, I must be okay.
Well, you're also young enough that you have enough reserves, right?
Yeah, it's coming back pretty quick. I don't know that I'd recommend that. Again, we've got some pretty good data that says, listen, there's a threshold here that you need to get to. So I think you have to respect that. I'll tell you, the more I look at HRV, the less value alcohol has in my life or anybody I work with. It just continues to drop. Now I'll use it as an acid to condition food that I'm cooking or things like that. Or and I'll even do the same. I'll tell you what, I smoke a mean rack of ribs and I do it with tequila. I infuse it with tequila. Um and love that. Okay. But I don't drink it. I really don't drink it.
Well, I think that's an epiphany, a very obvious epiphany that most people have as soon as they start doing any sleep tracking, even if they're not looking
Mhm.
at HRV. So I've
Right.
I've like yourself, early Aura adopter, and whenever I speak to people who just start wearing Whoop or just start wearing Aura or even Apple Watch, assuming it's tracking sleep well, the first realization is if I drink at night, my numbers are terrible.
They
Oh, well,
crash. Yeah.
yeah. So we've all been told that, but sometimes you have to walk it in order to realize it. Or as is becoming popular now, this whole concept of day drinking. Well, maybe if I drink early enough, then I'll be able to metabolize and I won't see that shift.
If
But let's
that's the decision you're making, you should probably get a counselor in your life. Okay. Just saying it's
if it's that important to you.
yeah.
So now let's shift here a little bit into let's make the assumption that I understand the importance of sleep hygiene. I have a good sleep routine. I'm doing the standard things. I go to sleep at the same time on a regular basis. I've got a dark room. I'm controlling temperature. I'm controlling sound. I'm minimizing light exposure an hour before I go to bed. I'm not eating within 2 hours of going to bed. Let's assume we have all that under control. And I'm still not happy with my baseline HRV. I want to have more capacity. In order of reasonable to increasingly eyebrow raising suggestions, what's on the menu, Don?
So once you've gone after sleep, the next place I go to is fitness. Um and get a heart rate monitor, learn and get your zones done in a manner that I, age-based zone prediction works for about two-thirds of the population. Okay. And um inevitably, so that means one in three are not correct. So when I'm doing a lot of this, I got to come up with a way to figure out what my training zones are. Um, and you can get that done a lot of different ways. I like to do a ramp test and just look at breathing, and we can do a nice job of picking your zones that way. But learning what zone 2 and zone 3 are when you're exercising. These are the zones where you build cardiovascular fitness, you lower inflammation. So, a lack of cardiovascular fitness is going to result in a lot of mitochondrial dysfunction, which is
Okay.
going to lead to inflammation. So, and inflammation is the number one driver of poor HRV, number one. Okay. So, if I want to
In
do
addition
that,
to a host of other health concerns
well, it's all reflected through that
or
inflammasome.
inflammatory
Okay.
response. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first thing I think you do is number one is you have compassion for yourself and you give yourself credit for going out and doing zone 2 work. And if all you have is time to do work, then do zone 2. If you go into zone 3, I'm fine with that. I want to stay away from zone 4. And this science is actually changing right now, Noah. There's some real interesting science with lactate and cortisol and the things that go on there. That in a year we may have a little different formula up at the top of that. But at the bottom, I think it's important to have compassion. Um,
Great
to
point.
say to say it's okay. It's okay to go out and walk. Um,
Well, so I'm going to jump in there because it's interesting. Walking has become incredibly popular again
yes.
right now. We see these trends, and I'm a big fan of walking. I walk the dog, but I cannot get into zone two walking. I can
Good
only
for
get
you.
into zone two walking if I am rucking. I've got at least 30
Okay.
pounds on and I'm doing hills. So I consider walking to be an important part of metabolic function. I consider it to be important in terms of just basic physiology, but I can't count that towards my zone 2 work.
Well, count your zone 1 then. Let your
Okay.
zone 1 and zone 2 flow together. I mean, don't
Okay.
we're not gonna be that, what's the word I'm looking for? Anal.
Diligent.
Diligent, anal,
I'm going
yeah,
with
whatever.
diligent. Yeah.
Okay, diligent. Yeah, let the 2 flow together. And then but the trick is staying away from zone 4. Okay, this is the trick, is that I had that same couple I was telling you that used to train with me. She was a very talented gymnast, high school, college gymnast, competed at the NCAA level. And one of the challenges, I like this. There's a really good book out that's called The Exuberant Animal, and in this book, this phys ed teacher talks about the difference between desert people and jungle people.
Mm,
Um, you're a desert person. You can go out for long treks, you carry your water with you, you can see any threats are off in the distance, it's in the desert. This college gymnast or this college wrestler, we're jungle people. We're used to moving in 3 planes. We don't carry our water, we can find it in the jungle, but we got threats everywhere. Um, so so the question is, what do you do if you're a jungle person living in a desert person society? Meaning that once she's had 3 kids and trying to, get back to focusing on herself, all she's got is marathons, triathlons, and half marathons. Okay, all desert events. I'm not saying don't do them, but what we did when I was training her was I would bring her in. We'd be in the middle of a training cycle. 2 things she did. The first is we'd be in the middle of training, and I'd bring her in, and all we would do is we would hit every group heavy for 1 set, just to tell her muscles, hey, here's a little jungle juice. Here's a little of what you crave. The other thing too is she, when she first started using a heart rate monitor, she goes out and she comes in, and I said, "How much zone 3 work did you do?" She says, "I couldn't get in zone 3." And I said, she said, "If I have to walk to be in zone 3," I said, "then walk. Um, I don't want you in zone 4. Um, I don't want the cortisol. I don't want those problems."
mhm.
Um, she did it, gave me about 2 weeks of that, and boom, all of a sudden you saw that base start to grow. You saw her times at given speeds and given heart rates increase. We got what we wanted out of it. So
So, so, so let me ask you
go
a
ahead.
question there. Yeah, because we spent a bit of time on this. So if I have a smartwatch, I'm going to assume most listeners do. I have a heart rate monitor, and when I enter my data, Apple decides what my zones are. Whoop decides what my zones are. Right? Probably age based. I'm assuming that
Definitely age
neither of
based.
those are
Yeah.
adjusting based on an actual observation of my data over time. So you alluded to this earlier. I think you didn't quite get to it. You were talking about what I would have called a ventilatory threshold.
Hmm.
So when we're thinking about, again, if I'm not going to go into a lab and I'm not going to get tested, but I want to make sure I'm doing the right work at home, I know I'm crossing out of zone 3 when.
So I would, if I were doing this, I would do 3 things. Number one, I would go Google a thing called Borg rate of perceived exertion,
Hmm.
RPE. Okay.
Hmm.
It'll give you this graph that goes, I think, from 8 to 20. Um, you're looking 15's the magic number. Okay. I'd get that graph and I'd go sit it on the bike, and I'd put a heart rate monitor on, and I'd start pedaling, and I'd get a steady heart rate. And then every minute I'd raise the resistance a little bit. Okay. And this is called a graded test. So anywhere from 1 to 3 minutes, I'd raise it a little bit, and I keep an eye on that Borg scale. Okay. And 15 is considered very hard. Okay. So you work your way up, easy, hard, you get to very hard, and then watch your breathing. Okay. Right there at 15, your breathing is going to go from deep, long breaths to where it's going to shorten up. Okay. There's a threshold that you cross. Boom. Whatever your heart rate is, when that breath changes, make that the line between zone 3 and zone 4. And I'll tell you this, many times I will artificially lower that number 5 beats just to stay away from 4. Okay, that's how important that is. So So ventilatory threshold, and that number stays largely very consistent. As fitness changes, that number stays very consistent. The amount of work you can do at that level changes dramatically. You can do a lot more work, but that heart rate at threshold stays pretty consistent.
Stays pretty consistent. And your ability to hit it will vary based on what you're doing. You may get there
Yeah,
faster. Yeah,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Okay. So check that box. So we were at how am I going to improve my HRV? The first was cardiovascular fitness, more emphasis on zone 2, build the base,
Zone two,
broaden the
three,
base.
just stay compassion. This is what I had to learn, Noah. I'm an old wrestler. We trained with our face on fire. If your face
Right.
wasn't on fire, you weren't training hard enough. And I had to learn to give myself grace to stay down here and
Yep.
trust the science.
Yep.
Um, and you can't do that unless you have a wearable, okay? Because when you feel it, you're feeling lactate, you're feeling hydrogen ion. That's what you're feeling. That means you're in zone 4, okay? And you're starting to aggregate acid. Um, so you got to have a device to do this.
Okay.
So that's the first step.
Okay. So that was step number 1. So I've now improved my cardiovascular fitness, still want a bigger HRV base. What's
Working
number
on my
2?
sleep and paying attention to alcohol. I'm doing all three of
Yep.
those things. Okay.
Done those.
One of the most powerful tools I've used is a technique called vagal nerve stimulation.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, so when we were out in Lake Tahoe, for the listeners, my wife and I are nomads. I'm coming to you from our 42-foot fifth wheel right now. And we've been in 38 states in the last 4 years. So we spent close to 6 weeks out in South Lake Tahoe last year. And to that point, I was pulling some of the highest HRVs I'd seen in 5, 6, 7 years. And I'm like, number one, I was at peace. I'm very happy when I'm there. Okay. Number one. Number two, that altitude I was at, my body liked. Um, and after about 3, 4, 5 weeks, I'm starting to get a bit of an altitude boost. So that was cardiovascular fitness. So
Hmm.
on my list of things to do, I need to go live in Lake Tahoe, but we're working on that.
All right.
Um, but other
For
than the
those who
Lake Tahoe,
can't.
other than the Lake Tahoe experience, I was out at a conference in Vegas a year ago, and I watched Dr. Nawaz Habib speak about vagal nerve resetting,
Hmm.
and saw some work that was done in the military with this vagal nerve stimulation. And I said, boy, that is promising. So I ordered one of these devices. Now, ironically, if I meditate or if I float, I see a change in HRV within 24 hours. I see a bump. Um,
Okay. If you
I
meditate
see
for how long?
usually takes at least 20 minutes in a day, in a period of during the day. When I've really got my practice and I've really got it pulled in, 20 minutes will start to get me a nice little bump.
And
Um,
just for the purpose of specificity, when you say meditate, giant body of work. It's a pet peeve of mine. Too many
for
things get
me, it's
thrown in the
very
bucket.
specific.
Yeah.
I have a heart math device. I'm a gadget guy. I have a heart math device that I really recommend. It's called the Inner Balance.
Hmm.
This thing gives you a visual feedback on both your breathing and your heart rate response. They do it through a thing called coherence, which we don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but but excellent tool. Excellent tool.
So you're doing a coherence practice. If I had another tool that I could potentially use similar to that would be a muse, although they don't do coherence. There's a concentration practice, or you can do biofeedback with heart rate, similar
Headspace.
approaches.
I like
Yeah.
Headspace. I like Calm.
But
I like,
but now when
yeah,
we switch to headspace and calm, we're liberating ourselves from tech for the most part.
exactly.
And now we're more in a mindfulness setting. But I think one of the key points is addressing that parasympathetic nervous system opportunity with either mindfulness or breath work. But you're not doing breath work that's specifically trying to double down on the vagus nerve stimulation. So for instance, there's some schools of thought that you can affect vagal nerve through breathing, through
It's not schools
pressure on
of
the
thought.
diaphragm.
There's
Yeah.
there's really good data that the diaphragmatic breathing, and there are breathing paces that absolutely influence vagal nerve performance.
Okay.
Data is very clear on that.
Okay.
Um, so that's another low cost, got to do it all the time. So meditation, breathing, things like that. The vagal nerve stimulation for me, what was interesting is I started using this thing, I think in May, um, with really no visible impact. Um, and I'm trying to remember when you and I spoke. Was it October, November?
October, yeah,
When
something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By October, I'm starting to flirt with nighttime resting, monthly averages in the 70s.
Yeah.
Um, and I went back and looked, and I looked at where the trend was coming from. It started the day after I had my vagal nerve stimulator delivered.
Yeah.
Um, but it took 5 months to work its way up. Now that my wife and I are living separate right now, my daughter injured herself playing rugby, and she lives over in Pittsburgh. And so my wife's been over there helping her, and I'm living by myself in Ohio. Um, and so she's got the vagal nerve stimulator, I don't. Um, and when yeah, I've slowly seen a decrease since I've not been doing daily HRV,
Right.
vagal
Right.
nerve stimulation.
Okay. So vagal nerve stimulation, we're going to put it in two different buckets. We're going to put it in the breathing bucket without apparatus. Generally, those breathing techniques are diaphragmatic with an emphasis on exhalation, longer exhalations, more
Hmm.
parasympathetic draw.
Hmm.
There are devices that can be attached to the ear. You use one that's in the throat, right at the vagal nerve itself.
Hmm.
So we've got breathing and meditation. We started with cardiovascular fitness. Then we did peace, breathing, vagal
Hmm.
nerve stimulation. Um, and now what's next? We're ramping
So,
up the weird things that Don will do to raise his HRV.
I don't think you can look at HRV, and once you start to study central nervous system, there's a portion of your central nervous system that's called the endocannabinoid system. um, Internal cannabinoid producing chemicals. Okay, chemicals that are produced that look like cannabinoids. These are produced largely when you exercise. This is where they come from. And when you look at the stress system and the way the stress system operates in the influence of the endocannabinoid system, then we start to see where there may be value in using cannabis extracts and terpenes in our nutritional practices. Um, Interestingly, we'll talk about one other thing after that, but when you look at vagal nerve stimulation and you look at the use of cannabis extracts as medicine,
Hmm.
they both go back to research around epilepsy.
Mm.
Okay. This is where they go to. And
Is it the origin story? Yeah.
they both have the same. And oh, by the way, the third thing that comes from that, ketone esters.
Yeah.
Um, so we'll talk about that in a second, but this is where things like CBD become promising. Um, Now the challenge with cannabis right now, Noah, is that cannabis, while we legalize it on the back of epileptics and cancer patients, it becomes an adult use rec market right off the
Right.
bat.
Sure.
Okay. So it's about THC, THC, THC. Too much THC is an anxiolytic. It's a sympathetic driver. It will bury your HRV. Um, I don't think you should smoke. Okay, so there's another problem that comes into play. I don't think you should ingest oil or smoke into your lungs on a regular, repeated basis. Um, but there are ways to consume cannabis extracts, CBD, CBDA dominant extracts through oil, through tinctures, transdermally, that are very
Gummies.
effective.
Gummies.
Yeah, I got to be careful about the sugar. But yeah, something like that. Um, but so you will find part of my regiment. Also, I'm constantly messing around. There's actually a supplement on the market. It's called HRV Plus. Comes from a company called Mode Method, MODEMETHOD.com, modemethod.com. I developed that supplement. It's a cannabis and fish oil combination that we, through a phase one trial, demonstrated improved HRV status. So
What kind of for the purpose of that study and that supplement, what kind of dose are you looking at daily for CBD?
depends on the person.
Okay.
Um, it looks like it's body weight related, but it's also going to be based on, I would call it your trauma profile.
Mm,
If someone comes in with I mean, again, someone who grew up in a rattlesnake pit and someone who grew up in a house full of bunnies, have different trauma profiles. Their amygdala, the part of their brain that detects fear, is
mhm,
different.
mhm,
And we know, so that endocannabinoid that your body produces is called anandamide, the Zen molecule, they call it. We know that in fear conditioning in mice and in dogs, there's a drop of anandamide in the amygdala.
mm,
Okay, it's been demonstrated.
interesting.
Can't do this study in humans because we don't do well after the autopsy. Um, but um, but there's a lot of good evidence there. We have a good mechanism for action. Makes a lot of sense to me. And I think if we ever reschedule cannabis and we get cross state commerce, we'll
Mhm,
start to see a reinvestment more back in the clinical application of this stuff,
mhm,
and not necessarily clinical, but performance oriented. Maybe that's still clinical. There's still a lot of potential there. And if you go back in my office, you'll see about a dozen different terpene blends. And in my fridge, I have CBD isolate and CBDA isolate, and that those are my favorites.
mm,
Not a THC fan. Don't use
mhm,
it very. I use it. It's almost by accident in
mm,
my stuff. So yeah, when you look at that, the use of CBD for the treatment of epilepsy, the use of vagal nerve stimulation originated, and then the third thing that we've talked about before is the introduction of what we call ketone esters. So you want to go down
so
that rabbit hole?
yeah, let's do it. This is the last step on the what are you willing to do to raise your HRV?
Yeah. So, so our audience has probably heard of a ketogenic diet, the keto diet. Okay. So what is a ketone? A ketone is the byproduct of fat metabolism. Okay. When I'm breaking down fat, it breaks down into what's called ketone bodies, and those ketone bodies can become fuel in our cellular machinery. Um, well, what we learned is that we can produce ketone, what we call ketone esters, which is a ketone that's bonded to something else. It's bonded to it's called R13-butadiol, but it's another ketone precursor. But those fat molecules go into the system, and again, a lot of people struggle with night. They wake up at night like at 3 or 4 in the morning, and if you're wearing a continuous glucose monitor, many times what you'll see is that your blood sugars have crashed.
Interesting.
The body sees it and says, oh, we need to get a little bit more energy in the system, so it drops some cortisol in, the stress hormone cortisol, to
Mhm,
raise glucose levels.
mhm.
And oh, by the way, wakes you up, creates a stress response.
So what I have heard in circles in sort of Eastern health circles is to use theanine as a way of regulating the cortisol release to avoid that cortisol spike
Yeah.
at night. Yeah. Okay.
I think there's lots of ways to skin that cat.
Okay.
And I think that's I'm not debating that at all. I'm not endorsing or detracting from. Makes a lot of sense to me. But what I do know is when I use ketone esters right before I go to sleep,
Hmm.
I sleep all night and my blood sugars stay stable. And it gave me close to another 30. I think when had I is it fair to say 30 points? I think it's fair to say 20 points. 20 of those 70 points was a function of ketone esters. And I get and they got to be careful. Ketones, there's a lot of bullshit
Hmm.
around the
There's a lot of
names, the
marketing.
formulas.
Yep.
Yep. There is one company. I take that back. There are two companies that have the right to produce what's called either the Veach or the Oxford ketone ester. Okay. There's a really good book out there called Ketones, the Fourth Fuel. If you're a physiology nerd, you'll love this. Uh,
Hmm.
Dr. Richard Veech is responsible for the development of the Veech ketone ester, which is a what's called a beta hydroxybutyrate that's bonded to an butane diol. That's the dude. That's the product. That's what Tour de France riders are guzzling in a race that's given them the ability to race times better than what they were doing when the
When they're doping.
Armstrong era was. And who knows? They may be doping now too. We just don't
Right.
know.
Right.
But we do know there's ketone esters in, and we do know anyone who understands cardiovascular exercise is looking at ketone supplementation. There is a benefit in the parasympathetic boost. It's telling your body, hey, you got plenty of energy, you're good. There's multiple benefits that come there. So KE4 or ketone aid is the product in this country. They have the Veech ketone ester. There's also a company in England that has the Oxford ketone, which is the same ester. It's the same
Hmm.
science. That the two
Hmm.
scientists worked on it together. Um, so I think it's worth a shot, and I'm still interested in exploring the utilization of ketones in short power sports, like in a sport like wrestling that has a weight cut. What is the role of the ketone ester? I think there's a lot to learn there.
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, we discussed ketone esters, and so I'm game. I'm always willing to try something, and
Yeah,
so I did try it for I think 5 days at 10 milliliters. So, disclaimer: it is the most horrific stuff you're ever going to taste, and
like
and
drinking
I come
rocket
from
fuel.
Man, I come from the old days. I was at Gold's Gym early in my career, and we were taking everything. I remember some of the nastiest supplements. This brought back traumatic memories. But interestingly enough, I didn't see a shift. So I got through a bottle and I didn't notice a shift. And I'm wondering if obviously everyone responds to different stimulus, different therapies, different ways. I'm wondering how much of that has to do with my metabolism and the way that I break down fuel.
I think it's probably most of it. I think
Yeah.
that's again, when you look at this, we don't have, Noah, I use the term, we live in a time where we have not had evolution. Evolution requires extinction for things to evolve. You've got to get rid of something to truly have evolution. Um, we've not had an extinction event for a long, long time. We have boatloads of diversity.
Mm,
Okay. There will come an event where that there's something about the diversity is going to create a strategic advantage, and we will then have evolution, but we're
hmm.
not there yet, and we better not hope we get there, because that's probably going to be a bad thing.
Right.
But it's probably true that you could be a vegan and I could be a carnivore, and we perform the same on the two different
Right.
diets. And if
Right.
we flipped, it could be dramatically worse.
Could be disastrous. Yeah.
Yes. So this is what's so important about the time that we live in. I love Dr. Peter Attia's, in his
Hmm.
book Outlive, he talks about medicine 3.0 and the fact that we now have the ability. And I'll tell you what, I've had conversations with probably 3 different AI companies that are looking at how can we get data to make it work. And
Hmm.
I completely believe in this. I think this is something that's on the horizon that is very potentially cool and very beneficial. The ability for us to develop N of aggravated, not aggravated, aggregated N of one data sets.
Hmm.
Um, Hopefully you're not aggravated when you do them.
Hmm.
But these high quality data sets, and I believe HRV is a critical tool in those data sets. I
It's a
don't think you
layer. It's a layer in the data set.
I think it's critical. I think it's your key performance indicator. I think it's the top one on the dashboard.
Yeah. Fascinating. Okay. I think that's really helpful. So let's recap. from the beginning. Don has really big hands. That was where we started. Farm strong, Don. That's what you are. You're farm strong.
I've baled a lot of hay.
So heart rate variability is a correlate to performance at athletics as well as life. There's no reason not to pay attention to it, but don't obsess about it.
I would say
And
it's a correlate to the ability to perform.
the ability to perform. Yeah, the
It's
capacity for performance. Yeah.
You can have everything else right, but if you don't have reserves,
Mm-hmm.
everything else doesn't get to work.
Mm-hmm.
You can have reserves, but not have everything else right, and you still
And
won't
you
have
still
good
can't do
performance.
the
But
task. Yeah.
it's a releasing factor that needs to be there to really express what you do.
Excellent. So start with sleep, get your sleep fixed, get it straight, optimize it, look at
Mhm.
your cardiovascular fitness, build a big base, be gracious with yourself, avoid the trap of hyper optimization. Don't look at YouTube and think that if you're not doing a VO2 effort every time you get on the bike, you're not doing
No,
anything worthwhile, because that's not true.
it's
And then
wrong.
as you and then is
It's
same thing.
wrong. Yeah.
And then as we move into then new activities, paras HRV loves parasympathetic. So the more that we can do to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, the better our HRV capacity. That can be meditation, it can be breathing, it can be contemplation, it can be prayer. There's all sorts of different ways
I
of channeling
absolutely agree with that.
that
Now,
sense of,
I'll tell you, pray to a God that doesn't give you guilt or doesn't give you fear. If you pray to a God that's a loving God, I'm all about that. But
yeah,
if the God you pray to makes you either guilty or fearful, time to shop for
then
a new God.
then you're back in the stress mode. And then if you're interested in going a little bit further into not quite biohacking, but some level of experimentation, exploring, especially within your state, given what you have access to, but exploring CBD specifically, not THC, as a tool for balancing sympathetic and for boosting HRV. By the way, a question on that. Do you recommend, like with your supplement HRV plus, do you recommend taking it at night, or does it not matter?
We recommend taking that at night because it has a pretty big sleep promoter in it. Uh, what we found is people who were taking it, the sleep was just taken off. And what you find is any of these practices, as you normalize your parasympathetic system and you normalize your autonomic system, one of the benefits is going to be your body wants to recover. And if your body wants to recover, you're going to want to take a nap.
You're going to want to let it. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we always recommend you take it at night.
Okay. And then for those who are feeling really brave and have the discretionary funds, because I do need to call out, ketone esters are not cheap. Um, they are pricey. You can pick up Ketone Aid on Amazon and give it a try. And again, you take it just before bed, right?
I
Right
take
before
that.
sleep.
That's the last thing I do before I climb in bed. Um,
Then you should
yeah,
be brushing your teeth afterwards, sir, because it is nasty.
that's the last thing I do before I climb in bed.
Okay.
Um,
So I think we've spelled out a great path, very approachable based on how far you want to go, how much money you want to spend. Um, let's back up because to the very beginning, I think we've both indicated this but not called it out. How do I measure HRV? In Don's world, if I'm only going to use one device, what do you recommend?
my number one recommendation is Aura right now. Um, and so real quickly, Nolan, if someone wants to explore this a little bit, on my website, trainrecoverwin.com, under products, I've got a free 20-point list. You want to explore HRV, go there, sign up, I'll send it to you. Number one. So and I talk about devices. You can actually measure HRV with your phone and you can do it very accurately and very inexpensively. The problem is you probably won't do it for a long period of time. You fall off. So you need something that's greasy that sticks with you. That's the reason I like an Aura ring. It sits on I take it off my hand once a week to charge it when I'm in the shower one day.
Hmm.
Um and I don't have to think about it anymore. My wife accepts the fact that I'm wearing this as my wedding ring. My wedding ring's up in my jewelry box. But that's this is what says I'm taken, and it stays on my hand, and it's easy. It's greasy smooth on your ability to get data.
Yeah, I second that. I do take mine off when I'm training kettlebells. Otherwise, I scratch the heck
Yeah,
out of it. So
yeah.
I wear both the Aura and the Whoop. I think personal preference aside, find a device that you're going to wear consistently. I think that's the
The Whoop
message.
is a pretty good heart rate monitor. I like the Whoop as a heart rate monitor, and you don't need to wear the Aura ring when you're working out.
Hmm.
There's there. I don't like Aura's heart rate feature. By the way, I don't like it as a heart rate monitor.
Hmm.
I just don't like it.
Hmm.
I'm still a bit of a purist. I like heart rate monitors. I have a chest strap that goes to my phone, and that's I want high quality heart rate.
Hmm.
Um, that's just a good chef
Acute
wants
heart
sharp
rate.
knives.
Yeah, acute
Pardon?
heart rate, but you're not sleeping
Yeah.
in your heart rate monitor,
No,
right?
absolutely not.
Yeah. So
Absolutely not.
again,
So
accurate HRV is being sampled throughout the night. That's why the Whoop, the Aura, and some of the smartwatches are so important. During the day, huge variability, hard to get signal, but at night, it's dark. The way the technology works, it's going to get a better signal. So I have found, so I'll sort of ground this. I have found when I look at I compare my Whoop data and my Aura data after a few weeks, they actually both settle down and the pure HRV score is very consistent. The number may not be the same, but the variability is almost exactly the same. So
the other device that's very good is Garmin's
yes,
products.
excellent.
Garmin have an excellent their HRV is very good.
Yeah.
Um, so they got their algorithms from a company called First Beat, which is one of the
Hmm.
leaders in the industry. So
They
I
bought
like
First Beat, didn't they? They acquired them
they
last
bought
year
the
or a year ago.
algorithms. They didn't buy the whole company, but Garmin's. So I go Aura, Garmin, and then everybody else.
And Garmin now has a wrist strap, forearm, bicep strap.
Oh, they do? I didn't know that. Good for them.
Well, Don, that was great. Wonderful conversation, great journey. Appreciate you taking the time. You've
Not
already
a problem.
identified your website, so I'll put that in the show notes. If people want to get in touch with you, is that the best way to reach you?
Or LinkedIn, Don Moxley on LinkedIn,
Okay.
or Train Recover Win. You can get me there. I have several in my products. We have a paper up there on cognitive performance. We have a program up there on I call it the complete athlete, the guide to peak performance. We have a product. I've got that 20 tips. I keep hanging things up there for people ask me questions. And I try to turn it into a white paper and put it up
Hmm.
there. So
And
yeah,
those
you
are
can find.
all those papers are available for free, right?
Yeah, they're all for free. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
The complete
Wonderful.
athlete's more of a program, but I
Right.
do have a paper that goes with that. So if you've got a young athlete, or if you're a coach, or if you're the parent of a young athlete, the complete athlete's built around what I call the athlete performance triangle. There's a physical, a psychological, and a skill side, and there's 15 different elements that have to get coordinated in order for this performance to come through. So that complete athlete is a program with a guide, an app, an audio file, and a coaching session.
Terrific.
So
Paul, I'll put all that in the show notes. Well, Don, thank you again for taking the time. Uh, Appreciate it. As a byproduct of this conversation, I'm going to try ketone esters one more time. I'm going to let you know how it works out.
let me wear. I'll make a phone call for you and help you out on that.
All right. Perfect.
Okay,
Thank you, Don.
I'll see
Appreciate you
you.
being on the show. Take care.
Bye bye.